The email hit my inbox like a punch in the gut. The subject line was as cold as the man who'd written it. Dinner invitation, Gregory Vaughn. I hadn't heard from Sarah's dad, not directly, for 2 years. 2 years of me dancing around his name, his reputation, and all the horror stories Sarah would let slip when she thought I wasn't listening. It wasn't just that Gregory Vaughn was rich. He was a billionaire, a hard-nosed businessman, a man who got things done, but did so with a level of coldness that left everyone else feeling like they were in the way. His world was full of people who knew how to get things done, how to speak the right words, wear the right clothes. And then there was me, a high school teacher with a job that barely paid the bills, a guy who still wore jeans that had seen better days. I couldn't help but feel like I didn't belong, like my entire existence was a mistake in the grand scheme of things. And now I had to go and meet him. Over dinner. The email wasn't long, but it was clear. Don't talk about your job, don't talk about your working class background, and whatever you do, don't be late. The last part felt like a threat. I had a headache already just thinking about it. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing around my apartment, ironing my shirt, running through potential conversation topics in my head like I was studying for an exam. Safe topics, nothing too personal. Maybe I'd ask about business or his favorite golf course. I wasn't sure why I thought I could pull it off. By the time I left, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Dinner at Gregory's house was a test, and I was afraid I was going to fail before I even stepped foot in the door. But I had no choice. This was Sarah's world. This was my future. I had to make it through the night. I grabbed my coat, checked the time, and sprinted down the stairs. Of course, I missed the train. There was no way I was going to make it to Gregory's house on time now. My stomach twisted in a knot as I pulled out my phone and hailed a cab. The ride was tense, the driver silent as the city's skyscrapers and crowds blurred past. I kept my eyes glued to the clock on my phone, watching the minutes slip by, my heart thudding faster with each passing second. We hit traffic, of course. The cab jerked forward, stopped, jerked again. I kept glancing at the time, then out the window. The streets were so different here. Tall trees lined the sidewalks. The houses looked like they were lifted from a magazine cover, and everything screamed wealth. Even the air felt different, clean and crisp, like it had been bottled and packaged. When the cab finally ground to a halt in front of a posh-looking neighborhood, I knew I was running out of options. "How much?" I asked the driver, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't already 5 minutes late and panicking. He gave me the price, I paid, and got out. My shoes hit the pavement, and I took a deep breath, trying to slow my racing thoughts. I had no choice now. I'd walk the rest of the way. It was the only way I'd make any progress anyway. As I walked down the pristine streets, the tension in my chest tightened. Mansions loomed on either side of me, their perfectly trimmed lawns looking like something out of a catalog. The houses were so big, they might as well have been castles. I felt like a ghost in the middle of their world, invisible but completely out of place. My shoes squeaked on the sidewalk, a constant reminder that I didn't belong here. The whole scene was a slap to the face. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with the faint scent of something expensive, flowers maybe, just added to the weight pressing down on me. My upbringing, my job, my life, they were all so small compared to this. I could almost feel it, the distance between me and the world I was walking through. I stopped in front of a small park to catch my breath, trying to steady myself before I went any further. I was already late. What's a few more minutes, right? That's when I saw him, a man sitting on a bench by the small fountain, looking tired, worn down. His clothes were ragged, the kind of clothes people wear when they have nowhere else to go. His hands shook slightly as he held a tattered bag, his face drawn in exhaustion, his eyes half-lidded. I could see his breath in the cold air. I was about to keep walking, just pass him by. I had to get to dinner, I reminded myself. But then my grandmother's voice, soft, clear as day, popped into my head. The measure of your character is how you treat someone who can do nothing for you. I stopped. It would have been so easy to keep walking, to just pretend I didn't see him. I could have justified it. He was a stranger, I didn't owe him anything. But I knew that wasn't true. My grandmother's words rang louder now, and I couldn't shake them. I wasn't the kind of person who walked past someone in need. Not now, not ever. I dug into my bag and pulled out the sandwich I'd packed for myself. It wasn't much, just a simple turkey and cheese, but it was something. I walked up to him, my palms sweating even though it was freezing outside. "Hey, I said, my voice a little rough. "Are you hungry? I've got a sandwich if you want it." He looked up at me with tired eyes, squinting like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. For a second, I thought he might say no, maybe tell me to leave him alone. But then his eyes softened, and a weak smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You sure?" he asked in a voice that was barely a whisper. "Yeah," I said, holding it out. "I've got more than enough." He took it, his hand shaking as he muttered a quiet thank you. I looked at him for a moment longer, but it was clear he wasn't going to say much more. His attention was already on the sandwich, the simple act of offering it now the most important thing between us. I could feel the seconds slipping away, the weight of being late pressing down again. But I didn't care. The jacket I was wearing was warm enough for me, but not for him. Without thinking, I slipped it off and handed it to him, the wool feeling rough in my hands as I draped it over his shoulders. You take care," I said, turning away before I could second-guess myself. I didn't look back as I walked away, my heart still pounding, my head spinning. It didn't matter that I was late. No, that wasn't the important part. What mattered was that for a brief moment, I had done something right. I glanced at my watch as I hurried toward the Vaughn estate. My stomach twisted when I saw the time. It was bad. I was running so late now, I wasn't sure if I could even make it inside, without everyone knowing I was a complete failure. My breath came quick, and my chest was tight with the kind of anxiety that made it feel like I couldn't get enough air. I'd barely turned the corner when the gates of the mansion came into view. The sheer size of them made my pulse quicken. They looked like the gates of a fortress, cold, imposing, as if the wealth inside was meant to shut the world out. My sneakers crunched against the gravel as I walked toward the intercom, my fingers trembling as I pressed the button. The speaker crackled to life, and I heard a voice that felt like it came from somewhere far above me. "Yes?" "Adam," I said, swallowing hard. "Adam Wells. I'm here for dinner with Mr. Vaughn." A pause. Then the gates creaked open slowly, the sound like something heavy being dragged across stone. I stepped forward, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest, the feeling that I was about to walk into a place I didn't belong. The driveway stretched out in front of me, flanked by towering hedges and perfectly manicured lawns. The mansion was huge, like something out of a movie, all white columns and gleaming windows. I felt like a fly in a palace, tiny and insignificant. The butler greeted me at the front door with a polite, "Mr. Wells." His tone didn't offer much, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes as he led me inside. The place was a labyrinth of marble floors, gilded frames, and paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a private home. Every step I took felt too loud, too out of place. I wondered if the soles of my shoes were scuffing the floors. I couldn't stop thinking about the homeless man. Why did I keep seeing him in my head? I was shaken out of my thoughts when the butler opened a set of massive doors and gestured for me to enter. The dining room. It looked like something from an old-world film. Long, polished tables stretching across the room. Chairs so grand they probably cost more than my entire apartment. The kind of room where everything felt too perfect, too controlled. I could feel the cold air in my lungs, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the house. But then my eyes landed on him, Gregory Vaughn. I froze. The man who sat at the head of the table was like a force of nature, his gaze cutting through the room as if he could see everything and everyone at once. But it wasn't just his presence that made my heart stop. It was his face. He looked exactly like the homeless man I had given my jacket to earlier. I blinked. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was the stress of being late, the weirdness of the whole evening. But there was no denying the resemblance. The same sharp nose, the same set jaw, the same deep-set eyes. The only difference was the suit, the crisp, expensive one that looked like it could have been custom-made. I shook my head, trying to push the thought out. I couldn't focus on that now. It was too bizarre. "Adam," Sarah's voice cut through my thoughts, warm and familiar. She stood up quickly, walking toward me with a small but genuine smile. She gave me a hug, whispered an apology in my ear, then stepped back to let me get a good look at her father. Gregory didn't stand. He didn't even look up from the glass of wine in his hand. His presence filled the room anyway, like a heavy weight pressing down. The silence was thick, the kind of silence you get in a place where everyone knows their role and doesn't dare disrupt it. "You must be Adam," Gregory said, his voice low, controlled. It felt like a statement more than a question, like he already knew everything he needed to about me, about my worth, about where I fit in the scheme of things. "Sir," I said, my mouth dry. I didn't know if I should sit down or just keep standing. I wasn't sure what was expected, but I chose the chair across from him, the one farthest from the head of the table. Sarah sat next to me, her eyes searching mine, but I could tell she wasn't going to intervene. She'd been through this before, this dance with her father. I tried not to look at Gregory, but I couldn't help it. I was sure now, the man at the table, the man who looked so powerful, was the same man I'd helped earlier, the same one whose face had softened when I gave him my jacket. But there was no way to say that, no way to bring it up. Gregory set down his glass of wine with a deliberate click. The sound echoed in the quiet, and I could feel the tension snap into place, like a thread pulling tight. The game had begun. The air felt thicker the moment I sat down. My knees brushed the edge of the table, and I instinctively pulled them back, trying to sit up straighter. The chair felt too big, like it was swallowing me whole, and Gregory's presence at the head of the table was all-encompassing. I could feel the weight of his eyes on me, like he was dissecting me piece by piece without saying a word. Sarah, clearly nervous, gave me a quick hug, squeezing my shoulder before she pulled away. She whispered a soft apology for my lateness, but she didn't seem too worried. Her words barely registered. All I could focus on was Gregory. There he was, the man whose face had haunted me all evening, sitting across from me in a suit that probably cost more than I made in a year. His calm, controlled demeanor was unnerving, the kind of power you could feel from a mile away. I tried to act normal, but my mind was reeling, my heart hammered in my chest. What the hell is going on? Gregory finally spoke, his voice smooth, calculated, as if he'd been waiting for the exact right moment. "So, Adam," he said, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as he looked at me, "tell me about your job." I almost choked on my own saliva. My job. I'd been warned not to talk about it, not to mention how I was a teacher, how I was barely scraping by, how I didn't fit into his world, but there I was, faced with the question. "I'm a high school history teacher," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I love it. It's rewarding, helping kids learn about the world." Gregory raised an eyebrow, like he'd just heard the most amusing thing. "A teacher?" he repeated, his tone flat. "Tell me, Adam, what's it like living on such a modest salary?" I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "It's fine. I get by. It's not about the money for me. I'm passionate about what I do." He didn't say anything at first, just studied me with those cold eyes. It was like he was trying to see through me, peel back the layers of my life to expose every flaw, every weakness. I could feel myself sweating under the pressure. I'm failing already. But I couldn't stop. I know it's not a high-paying job, but it's honest work. I get to make a difference in kids' lives. I know not everyone values that, but it means something to me. Gregory's lips twitched, just the slightest hint of a smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I see. And how do you plan to support my daughter in a future like that?" The question hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What could I say? I had nothing to offer but myself. And in this room, with these people, that felt like nothing at all. Before I could find my voice again, Gregory continued, his gaze moving from me to Sarah, then back to me. "You do understand, don't you, that a woman like Sarah deserves more than just a passion for teaching? She deserves stability, security, a future." I nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. Sarah looked at me, her hand resting gently on my arm, but even she seemed distant, caught in the pull of her father's power. She didn't say anything. I wanted to snap back, tell Gregory that a future wasn't about money or status, that it was about love, about being there for each other no matter what. But I knew better. I could already feel the walls closing in, the space between us growing wider with every word he said. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. Gregory's questions were relentless, probing deeper with every bite of food. He wanted to know how much I earned, what I had planned for the future, whether I could match his world. I found myself answering honestly, despite my nerves, but each answer felt like I was digging a hole for myself, getting buried deeper and deeper in his expectations. The tension was suffocating. Every word that came out of my mouth felt inadequate. I could feel the strain building in the room. the pressure tightening around my chest. It wasn't just dinner anymore. It was a test, and I was failing. I couldn't even look at Sarah. I could sense her disappointment, her helplessness. She was caught in the middle, and I could see it in her eyes. She wanted to reassure me, but even she knew the truth. In Gregory's world, I was small. I was nothing. The more Gregory spoke, the more I realized I wasn't just sitting at a dinner table. I was sitting at the foot of a judgment of my worthiness to be with Sarah, and I was losing. The silence hit me like a hammer. It was as if everything in the room had frozen, except for Gregory. He was calm, but his words sliced through the air like a blade. "You are late, young man." His voice was ice. "That shows a lack of discipline." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. I tried to form the words, to explain the cab breakdown, the walk through the neighborhood, but it all felt pathetic, weak in the face of his cold stare. I could feel my face burning, a mix of embarrassment and frustration that twisted my stomach into knots. I didn't mean to be late, Mr. Vaughn," I stammered, but he waved his hand like he was brushing me off, his eyes already moving to something else. "Doesn't matter," he said, dismissive, his voice sharp. "Lateness is a reflection of your character. Discipline is the foundation of everything, especially when you want to be part of something bigger than yourself." He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, he looked directly at me like he was sizing me up. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. The weight of his gaze felt like it was pressing me down. "Tell me, Adam," he continued, his tone condescending now, "why should someone like you be deserving of Sarah's future?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Sarah, her face pale, shifted beside me. I could see the discomfort in her eyes, but she didn't speak up. Not yet. It was like she was waiting for me to answer, but her father's words hung in the air like a trap, and I was already stepping into it. I swallowed hard, trying to find some shred of confidence. I love Sarah," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "I want to build a future with her. I'm not rich, but I'll work hard. I'll make sure she's happy." Gregory let out a low laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Happiness?" he repeated, like it was something laughable. "And how exactly do you plan on making her happy, with your modest salary and your humble background?" I felt my chest tighten. My background, my modest salary. He had me cornered, but I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't going to pretend that my job as a teacher could compete with whatever world he was offering. "I'm not pretending to be something I'm not," I said, my voice rising just a little. "I can't offer Sarah a mansion or a yacht, but I can offer her something real. I can offer her love, respect, and a life that means something. I can't promise the world, but I can promise I'll try every day." Gregory's eyes narrowed. His gaze didn't soften. "And that's enough for her? For my daughter?" He leaned forward now, his voice quieter but more dangerous. "How could someone with such a modest job and background possibly fit into the world we've built, Adam? How could you possibly give her a life she deserves?" I felt my throat close up. The words I had in my head didn't seem to matter. Every explanation I tried to give, every justification, felt hollow in the face of his disdain. Sarah shifted in her chair, but she didn't say anything. I couldn't look at her. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. No matter what I said, no matter how hard I tried to prove myself, it was never going to be enough. I wasn't rich enough. I wasn't powerful enough. I wasn't Gregory Vaughn enough. The questions kept coming, each one more brutal than the last. What's your plan when Sarah needs more than what you can provide? What's your plan when things get hard? His voice was steady, cold, each word cutting through me like a surgical knife. I started, but he interrupted, his voice sharp and unyielding. No, Adam, he said, his eyes dark. You're already failing. You've already shown me who you are. You've shown me what you can offer my daughter. The weight of his words hit me in the chest, like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe for a second. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if I was drowning in it. Gregory sat back in his chair again, his fingers tapping on the table slowly. This isn't just about you, Adam. It's about Sarah. It's about what you can give her, what you can offer her, and you've already failed. I wanted to fight back, to tell him that he didn't know me, that he didn't know what I was capable of. But I knew it wouldn't matter, not with him, not with Sarah's father, who was looking at me like I was a disappointment, like I didn't belong here, at this table, in this world. Gregory's voice was low, final. But you might still have a chance. You might still have a chance to redeem yourself, but you've already lost, and I won't forget that." His words settled into the room like a weight, crushing the last bit of hope I had left. I wanted to argue, to scream, but I could only sit there, feeling smaller with every passing second. The moment was over. I'd failed. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and silence. My stomach was a twisted knot, and I couldn't focus on anything except the gnawing feeling that I'd just been crushed under the weight of Gregory's words. My hands were trembling as I pushed my food around my plate, not really hungry anymore. The tension was unbearable, thick like fog, and I could feel every pair of eyes in the room on me, even if they weren't directly looking. Sarah was quieter now, her father's words hanging between us like an invisible wall. She leaned over to me, her voice soft but urgent. "Adam, it's okay," she whispered, her hand brushing mine. "My dad doesn't mean it. He's hard on everyone. You're doing fine." I looked at her, her face etched with worry, but the words felt hollow. I could tell she was trying to make me feel better, trying to bridge the gap between her father's world and mine. But I couldn't shake the truth. I wasn't what Gregory wanted for her. I wasn't what he thought she deserved. And no matter what I said, no matter how hard I tried to show him I was worthy, it would never be enough. "I'm not enough," I muttered under my breath, not even realizing I'd said it out loud. The words just slipped out, raw and heavy. She froze for a second, her expression faltering. "No, Adam," she said, squeezing my hand tighter. "You are. You just have to—" "Not according to him," I interrupted, the bitterness rising in my throat. "I'll never be enough for him. I'm not the guy he wants. He made that clear." Sarah's eyes dropped to her plate, her lips pressed together in a thin line. She didn't argue, didn't try to reassure me again. She didn't need to. We both knew it was true. The weight of Gregory's expectations was suffocating, and no matter how hard I tried, I would always fall short in his eyes. I couldn't sit there any longer. My chest was tight, my heart pounding in a way that felt like it might break me. I wasn't just angry, I was crushed. I couldn't take another second of being in that room, of feeling like I didn't belong, like I was failing at something that mattered to Sarah more than anything. "I need to go," I said, pushing my chair back from the table. My voice felt thick, heavy, but I couldn't stay. "I need to clear my head. I'll walk back to the station." Sarah looked up at me, her face soft with concern. "Adam, don't leave. Please, it's not—" I cut her off, my voice firmer now. "I'm not doing this. I can't sit here and pretend anymore. I need to go." She didn't argue, she just nodded, a look of resignation on her face as she stood up. "I'll come with you." "No," I said quickly, too quickly. "You stay. This isn't about you. It's about me." I turned and walked out before she could say anything else. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face, and I breathed it in, trying to shake off the suffocating feeling that had followed me inside that house. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going or how I was going to get there, but I needed space. I needed to think. The grounds of the estate were vast, the manicured lawns stretching out before me under the glow of street lamps, the house towering behind me like a monument to everything I didn't have. I walked, my footsteps loud on the gravel, each one reminding me how far I was from where I thought I should be, how much further I had to go. As I walked past the hedge-lined paths and over the stone bridges, my mind kept drifting back to the homeless man I'd helped earlier. What had Gregory said? "It's about what you can offer my daughter." I didn't have anything. I didn't have the luxury of wealth or connections. I didn't even have a future that felt certain. But in that moment, walking through this sprawling, cold estate, I thought about the sandwich I'd given to that man, the warmth of my jacket around his shoulders. He'd smiled at me, a tired, grateful smile, as if that small act had meant something. Maybe that was all I had. Maybe that was the only thing I could offer, whatever small kindness I could give to the world. And maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe, despite everything, I hadn't failed. Gregory didn't see it, but that didn't mean it didn't matter. I had helped someone when they needed it, and for a brief moment, I had made their life a little easier. I could live with that. I took a deep breath and kept walking, my heart lighter than it had been since I stepped through those gates. Maybe I wasn't the man Gregory wanted me to be, but I knew who I was, and that was enough. I found a bench tucked under a small tree, the leaves rustling in the cool breeze. I sat down, my legs stiff from walking, but I didn't care. The mansion behind me felt miles away, and for the first time that night, I could breathe. I stared up at the stars, scattered across the sky, like tiny promises I couldn't reach. Everything had felt so heavy inside, like I was walking around with a weight on my chest. But now, out here, in the quiet, I could finally think straight. I had been running on a treadmill, chasing approval from Sarah's father, trying to mold myself into something I wasn't. But what was the point? Even if I somehow made it into Gregory's world, even if I could prove I was good enough for him, would it make me happy? Would it make me feel whole? I knew the answer, no. I didn't need Gregory's approval. I didn't need his validation. What I needed was to be true to myself, even if that meant losing Sarah. The thought hit me harder than I expected, like a punch to the gut. Could I really walk away from her, from everything I thought I wanted? The truth was clear now. If I kept chasing someone else's dream of who I should be, I'd be stuck forever. I could spend the rest of my life trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine, but that wouldn't bring me peace. It wouldn't bring me happiness. I had to let it go. I sighed and leaned back, staring up at the sky, trying to steady my breath. That's when I saw him, Gregory. It wasn't the sharp-suited Gregory I'd met inside the house. This Gregory was dressed in a worn jacket, the kind that looked like it had seen better days. A suitcase dangled from his hand. His posture was different, less imposing. Like he wasn't sure of himself either. He didn't seem to notice me at first, but then his eyes caught mine. He paused, his gaze softening just a little before he walked toward me. I wasn't sure if I should move, or say something, or just stay silent. But he sat down next to me without asking, his presence as heavy as ever. "You look like you figured it out," Gregory said, his voice almost gentle. It was a side of him I hadn't expected, and it threw me off for a second. I didn't know how to respond. It felt strange, having him sit next to me like this, after everything that had happened. He didn't wait for me to speak. "You're probably wondering why I've been so hard on you," he continued, his voice steady. "Why I've pushed you to your limits. I've been testing you, Adam, all of you, testing your character." I blinked. Testing me? The words didn't make sense at first, but I could hear the sincerity in his voice. Gregory's eyes turned down to the grass, and for a second, he looked human. "I don't trust people easily. I've spent my life building everything I have from nothing, and I've seen a lot of people try to get close to my family for the wrong reasons. Money, status, whatever they think they can gain. But not you." He paused, watching me closely. "You helped that man tonight, the homeless one. That's what I was waiting for." My breath caught. He had been watching me all night? That moment when I gave the man my jacket? "You saw that?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Gregory nodded, a flicker of approval in his gaze. "I was watching you. Your decision to help him. That's the kind of character I respect. Not the guy who tries to impress with grand gestures or promises of wealth. You acted with kindness. That's what matters." I couldn't wrap my head around it. Everything I thought I knew about Gregory, about who he was, about what he valued, had just shifted. "You mean you were testing me all along to see if I was, worthy of Sarah?" My words came out in a rush. Gregory gave a small shrug, his expression still unreadable. "Not just worthy of Sarah, but worthy of being part of something bigger, of our family, of what I've spent my life building. It's about more than just money or status. It's about the kind of person you are when no one's watching." I didn't know what to say to that. I was still trying to process it, trying to piece together the puzzle he'd just laid out. "I don't expect perfection," he added. "I never did. I just needed to see if you had what it takes to handle the responsibility that comes with being with Sarah, to stand by her when things get hard, to make decisions that matter. And you did. You passed my test." I could barely breathe. This entire night, this entire evening of fear and humiliation had all been part of some twisted test. "You're the right person for her," Gregory said, his voice steady, no longer cold. "I've been hard on you because I needed to see if you could handle it. And you did. Against all odds, you did." I sat there, stunned. I hadn't expected any of this. Gregory, of all people, telling me I was good enough. It felt like the floor had just shifted under my feet. Everything had just changed in an instant. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't need to chase someone else's approval anymore. I just needed to stay true to who I was, and that was enough. I stood up from the bench and walked back toward the mansion, my mind still buzzing from the conversation with Gregory. I wasn't sure what I'd expected, but it wasn't this. A sudden shift from judgment to approval. I had been prepared to walk away from everything, but now it felt like I had been given a second chance. I wasn't sure what to make of it. The lights from inside the house spilled across the driveway as I approached the door, and my heart picked up speed again. I didn't know how I was supposed to go back in there, how I was supposed to face Sarah after everything. But I couldn't just leave things hanging. I pushed open the door and stepped into the dining room. Sarah's eyes immediately locked onto mine, and her face lit up with surprise, relief, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Adam," she said softly, standing up from the table, her voice full of concern. "I thought you were gone. Is everything okay?" I nodded, giving her a small, reassuring smile. Yeah, everything's fine." She seemed to hesitate for a second, clearly wanting to ask more, but I could see her holding herself back, unsure of what had happened between me and her father. Gregory was still sitting at the head of the table, but something had changed in him too. His posture was less rigid, his gaze not quite as sharp. It was like the walls had come down. He looked up at me and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't much, but it meant something. "Sit down, Adam," Gregory said, his voice calm. "We've got things to discuss." I didn't know if I was relieved or nervous, but I took my seat again, next to Sarah. The air was different now, less tense, but still thick with unspoken things. I could feel the weight of Gregory's gaze on me, but it wasn't the same as before. This time, it didn't feel like I was being scrutinized or judged. Gregory cleared his throat and addressed both of us. "I've been hard on you, Adam," he said, his tone much softer than it had been earlier. "I didn't expect you to pass my test the way you did." I blinked, not sure what he was talking about. "Test?" He nodded. "I've been watching you all evening. The way you handled the situation with the homeless man, that's what matters. That's what I was looking for. Not your job, not your income, not your background, your character. You showed me the kind of man you are, and I respect that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mouth went dry, and I glanced at Sarah, who looked as shocked as I felt. Gregory's words were nothing like what I'd expected. The man who'd been so harsh only hours ago was now admitting that he'd been testing me, watching me, waiting for me to show some kind of moral strength. And I had passed. Sarah's eyes flicked from Gregory to me, her mouth opening and closing, as if she was trying to process what had just been said. She looked stunned, but in a way that seemed to lift something off her shoulders. "I didn't know," she whispered almost to herself. He didn't tell me." I shook my head, not really sure how to respond. "I didn't expect it either?" Gregory gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "That's the thing about tests. You don't always see them coming, but you passed." For the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe. It was like the weight of the evening had finally lifted. I wasn't the failure I'd thought I was. I hadn't lost. I had something real, something worth holding on to. The rest of the meal passed without incident, the conversation lighter, easier. Gregory didn't probe or question me again. Instead, we talked about other things: Sarah's childhood, her education, some trivial topics that helped erase the tension in the room. It felt normal. I found myself actually laughing, enjoying the moment, even though I was still processing everything that had happened. When the dinner ended, Gregory stood up, giving me a firm handshake. "I don't say this lightly, Adam, but I think you're the right person for my daughter. You're not what I expected, but sometimes that's a good thing." The words settled over me, and I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. This was what I had wanted all along, but it hadn't come the way I thought it would. It had come through a test, through kindness, through my own actions. And somehow, in the end, that was enough. As everyone stood up to leave, Sarah pulled me aside, away from the table, her eyes filled with concern. "I'm sorry about my dad," she said quietly, her voice a little shaky. "I know he can be difficult. I didn't want you to go through all of that." I shook my head, feeling a weight lift off me that I hadn't even realized was there. "I'm not angry, Sarah. Honestly, I'm just happy to be myself. For the first time tonight, I feel like I'm not pretending." She smiled, the relief clear in her face. "I'm glad." She hesitated, then added, "I've always wanted you to be you. No one else." I reached for her hand, feeling more sure of myself than I had all evening. Maybe things weren't perfect, and maybe the future was still uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't need anyone's approval but my own. A few months passed, and things between Sarah and me grew stronger. We were different, more sure of ourselves, less caught up in trying to fit into the expectations of others. I had learned to stop chasing someone else's idea of what I should be, and Sarah had learned to stand beside me, not between me and her father. We were sitting in the car one Saturday afternoon, on our way to visit Gregory. The nerves were still there, but not like before. There was no dread anymore, no feeling that I was stepping into a world that didn't belong to me. This time, it felt different. This time, I was walking in as myself. When we arrived at Gregory's house, the mansion looked as imposing as ever, but I didn't feel the same weight pressing down on me. I stood next to Sarah, her hand in mine, and for the first time, I wasn't looking at it like a test. I was looking at it like a visit to a man I'd come to respect, in my own way. Gregory greeted us at the door. His usual stern expression softened just a little when he saw me. "Adam," he said, giving me a nod that felt like an acknowledgement of something earned. Not just from the past few months, but from the night I'd met him, the night I'd stepped into his world, tried to prove myself, and walked away knowing I didn't need his approval to be who I was. We had coffee together, made small talk, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was being judged. I felt like I belonged, not because of what I had, but because of who I was. It wasn't about status or wealth. It was about integrity. It was about treating people with respect, regardless of what they could offer you. Gregory knew that now, and he didn't need to say it, but I could tell. He respected me. When the day came for our wedding, I was filled with a mix of excitement and gratitude. The ceremony was small, nothing like the extravagant weddings I'd seen in magazines. It was simple, just the way Sarah and I wanted it. We weren't after anyone's approval, not even Gregory's. The whole day felt like a fresh start, an affirmation that the life we were building together was one we could be proud of. I was surprised when Gregory showed up at the wedding, looking sharp in a suit that fit him perfectly. His usual hard-edged demeanor was gone, replaced with something that felt warmer, more genuine. He pulled me aside before the ceremony began, and for the first time, he spoke to me like a man, not a test subject. "You've earned this," he said, his voice low but steady. "Not because of what you have, but because of who you are. I've watched you, Adam. I respect you. You've proven that." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting it, but I could feel the weight of his words. Finally, there was approval, but it wasn't tied to anything I could buy or achieve. It was tied to the kind of person I had become, the kind of man who had learned to be himself, regardless of what others expected. As Sarah and I exchanged vows, I felt a calm settle over me. I had embraced who I was, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending to be someone else. This wasn't just about marrying Sarah, it was about choosing to live authentically. The ceremony ended and the reception was filled with laughter, friends, and family. But it wasn't until later, as we stood on the balcony, watching the night sky stretch out before us, that I realized how much had changed. I hadn't just married Sarah, I had finally embraced myself. And in doing so, I had learned that approval, true approval, doesn't come from wealth, status, or others' expectations. It comes from living with integrity and being true to who you are. The journey had changed me, and it had changed everything.